All right, good morning and welcome to this meeting of the Committee on the Revision of the Penal Code, which is now in session. I'm Mike Romano, Committee Chair. Thank you for everyone joining us today. Going to begin with a roll call of committee members in alphabetical order. Assemblymember Bryan is not here yet. Judge Espinoza,
I'm present.
Professor Ochin is not here yet. Professor Rummel,
Present.
and Senator Skinner is not here yet either. I had a short statement that I wanted to that I was planning to read about Senator Skinner, as this is her last meeting. Unfortunately, she's been called away on a family emergency. So I'll just make it extra brief and say that we miss her. We wish her all the best, of course, while during this family emergency. And I've I just want to say somewhat formally that I've can't tell you this committee would not be half as successful as it wasn't for her advocacy and guidance, and I've really personally appreciated her mentorship and friendship over the years. I think we're all going to miss her, and the state is as well. So I wanted to say that. All right. Today we're going to move in three parts. First, we're going to discuss the draft of our annual report and recommendations for 2024, and then we'll vote on whether or not to adopt the draft and any changes that might need to be made to it. Second, we'll have a brief discussion of topics that we'll consider for next year. And finally, we'll hear a brief presentation from Tom on current violent crime statistics for California in 2024. We'll also have public comment. Before we get started, let me say a few things about the Bagley-Keene Act. Before we get into substance, there's some requirements that we must adhere to. Members of the public can watch and participate in this meeting in the first floor conference room at 925 L Street in Sacramento. Thank you to Megan for being present at that location. And as a reminder to committee members, the law requires that we visibly appear on camera during the meeting unless someone is sharing their screen or if there's a technical difficulties. If you have technical difficulties, please rejoin the meeting with video as soon as you can. All right, with that said, I want to move just quickly to administrative matters, which is to approve the minutes from the November 2024 meeting. Can I have someone second approving the minutes?
Second.
Anybody opposed? All right, the minutes from 2024, from the November 2024 meeting, previous November 2024 meeting, are adopted.
You mean October, I think, Mike.
Oh, excuse me. There's a typo in my notes. All right, now to the main substance of our meeting today, which is to discuss the annual report that has been prepared by staff and circulated to everyone and is on our website. Let me say a couple things at the outset. None of these recommendations should be a surprise to anyone. They follow a year's worth of our study and hearings, including our last month's hearing where we talked about, I believe, each of the reform recommendations. We'll follow our usual process in approving the report. First, we'll discuss the report and any potential changes among members and staff. Then we will hear public comment, as we must before voting. Finally, we will address any concerns or issues raised during the comment session and vote on whether or not to approve the report with any noted changes. The report is an elaboration of the recommendations we studied over the course of the past year and discussed in summary form at our meeting last month. As a reminder, these recommendations are the culmination of the past years of this committee's work, including over 40 expert witnesses, hours of deliberation, public comment, and a tremendous amount of legal, historical, and empirical research by our terrific attorneys, Tom, Rick, and Joy. It is truly extraordinary work, you guys. Thank you so much. We couldn't do it without you, obviously. As always, our recommendations are supported by empirical reports, analysis of similar reforms from other states, and original research conducted with help from our friends at the California Policy Lab. We are still finalizing data that this draft and report, we're still finalizing data, and this draft and the report will also have to be put in formal, final form by a graphic designer. The goal today is to see if there's any changes to the committee wants to make, with the understanding that I will have final discretion over copy editing, adding citations, updating data, and other non-substantive changes. All right, those are the ground rules. Here are the recommendations. There are 10 of them. First, it's to harmonize and clarify the post-conviction process for showings of innocence and wrongful convictions. Second is to expand post-conviction discovery rules. Third is to modernize the compensation rules for innocent people or people who've been proven innocent. Four, improve California's approach to driving under the influence offenses, including creating judicial diversion for first-time DUI offenders, expanding the use of DUI collaborative courts, and streamline the license suspensions related to DUI. Five, modernize the civil asset forfeiture system. Six, establish prosecutorial-led diversion for gun possession offenses. Seven, eliminate accomplice liability for applied malice murder. Eight, limit firearm enhancements to people who used or were armed with a firearm. Nine, prohibit felony murder rule in provocative act murder cases. And 10, specify that Proposition 57 credits shall apply to indeterminate sentences. As an initial matter, I just want to quickly discuss the first recommendation, which is about innocence and wrongful conviction. At the committee's discretion, staff has written up part of this recommendation to allow for procedural bars and habeas petitions to be overcome if defendants show that there is a reasonable probability that they are innocent. Staff had originally suggested a slightly different formulation of the standard, allowing procedural bars to be overcome if the defendant shows by a preponderance of evidence that there would have been a different result in light of new evidence presented. On further reflection and discussion with staff, I suggest that we use the staff's original proposal because showing of innocence is quite a high burden. In other words, I just want to make sure that we're clear. I recommend that we switch to the standard of that you are overcome procedural bars, especially timeliness and successive petitions, if you can prove by a preponderance of evidence that the new evidence presented would have led to a different result in your case. That's my recommendation. Does anybody have any thoughts on that or any other of the recommendations that we've gone over the past months? All right. The staff, Tom, Rick, or Joy, do you want to highlight or note anything?
I don't think so. I think you said it very well, Mike. Been working on these for the better part of 11 months. And this is our sixth report, technically, if we include the death penalty report. So I think everyone's pretty familiar with the way these things look. And Heidi, I think, has been a friend of the committee for a while too. So even though this is her first vote, I think she's familiar with the process. So no, just glad we're at this point, and appreciate all the work Rick and Joy have done, especially.
And yeah, I just want to second that or say again, I can't emphasize enough about, we sit here, we have the hearings, we, meet with experts, but, all of the heavy lifting is done by you three. And I can't tell you how grateful I am and appreciative of your work and to work as colleagues with you. We've another year end, and thank you so much for all you do. All right. We will take a final vote after hearing public comment toward the end of today's hearing. We cannot vote until after having public comment. First, Tom and I have a few administrative matters to cover.
I think it is clear, but I just want to confirm that on the part about the procedural bars and the habeas stuff you mentioned, Mike, we're good to change that to preponderance, different outcome from the current write-up, which is reasonable probability of innocence. So both of those pieces will change slightly. Just wanted to
Yes.
be totally done on that.
And I do want to add, since we are short a couple of our committee members, I want to make sure that those members who are not present here have an opportunity to connect with Tom should they have any concerns that they want to raise about the report, and that we'll leave it to Tom's discretion as to whether or not those are substantive and need to come back to a committee vote, or whether they are more non-substantive and therefore can be adopted by staff.
Yes, there's limited ability for committee members to discuss outside of the meeting under the Bagley-Keene Act, and I will make sure we follow as strictly as we need to the letter and spirit of the law.
We've discussed this many times. I don't expect many substantive or any substantive amendments, but I did want to extend that courtesy to the other members of the committee who couldn't join us today. All right. With that said, we're going to look ahead to 2025 and have a brief presentation from Tom about proposed topics of study for the following year, for the next year.
Great, let's do it. So we will do what we've done in previous years, which is, I'll present a few things that staff thinks is appropriate to look at. And we came up with this list based on, discussions that the committee has had throughout this year, other stakeholders that we've spoken with throughout the government and sort of, in the criminal justice world. And this is what we would sort of propose as a very rough list to start with next year. And of course, there's room to change this, modify it, add to it, subtract to it. We sort of just want to set a rough framework so we can get started on our work, and we'll talk about what we think the first topic should be, and then we can.
This is not in any order. Or is this in the order that you expect?
I would say it's in a very rough order. The deeper we get into the list, the hazier the order gets. Let's put it this way. I think the first two, we would propose sort of doing these as the first two topics, and then, we'll have some flexibility for the rest of them.
I would like to move the Racial Justice Act implementation up the ladder a bit.
Okay, great.
Something that we've been working on a lot. I think there's a lot of concern and frustration throughout the state, and I think we'll need time to really dig into that.
Yes. So
I understand that cuts both ways. Time.
Okay. Right.
So let's put somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, absolutely. And there was a big article in Cal Matters about the Racial Justice Act. If folks hadn't seen that, I recommend it on these exact topics that I think key up even some more issues.
Great.
Okay, so the first one is accomplice liability continued, is what Rick, Joe, and I have been thinking of it as, and particularly focusing on extreme sentences for women. There is a big report that the Stanford Criminal Justice Center put out a few weeks ago about this topic that has a lot of new data and insights that I think are a great jumping off point for us. And Heidi and Rick actually both went to a convening at Stanford that last week, 2 weeks ago, who knows, recently about it. So I think this will be a great thing for us to dig into. I know it's something that the committee members have wanted to look at for a long time. And we've also started working with the California Policy Lab a little bit to get some data on sort of the experience, what the data shows about women who are going to prison over time. And then as I said, we propose that sort of as the first topic. Second one has to do with peremptory challenges, and we're thinking of looking at this in two ways. One is, I think, what almost everyone is familiar with, peremptory challenges to jurors. There was a law passed a few years ago that tried to really improve the way that this works, to get rid of racial and other bias and the use of peremptory challenges to sort of build on the Batson and Wheeler framework, as it's called. So I think it's a good time to look at that law and also consider whether peremptory challenges even make sense, if there's a way to really root out bias in the use of them at all. One state has forbidden them entirely, and we've heard that the Sacramento DA has stopped using them in criminal cases as well. So I'm not going to say that necessarily is where the committee will come out, even where staff will come out, but that's sort of the idea, is to both look at the changes in the law recently around this and maybe consider that bigger idea as well, which I know is very complicated. And the second piece of this is to look at challenging judges, under Code of Civil Procedure 170.6, which, as far as I can tell, California is unique in that in a criminal case, a DA or a defendant can kick a judge off a case for any reason at all. And in fact, they can kick judges off all criminal cases if they want to in some circumstances. And it seems like something that we should take a look at, and would make things a lot more efficient in court too, if you're not going to have cases reassigned at a litigant's discretion. Judge Espinoza, I don't know if you have any thoughts on this, but it seems like something good for us to look at.
I don't have any thoughts at the moment, other than this is an issue. I think we should look at it. I think the preemptory challenges are used generally in an appropriate way, but from time to time, an office will decide to put somebody out of business and remove them from hearing any of their cases. Um, and I have rarely found that to be appropriate. I mean, one bad ruling on a high profile case shouldn't result in a blanket 170.6. So I think we should look at it.
Great. Third topic is looking at the classification of offenses as serious and violent. This is something that the legislature has been taking action on, I think, in the last two sessions, and I think we can provide a very helpful role about saying, what does it mean when an offense is serious or violent in a very holistic way? And then what offenses are on this list, what should be on there, what maybe shouldn't be on there, and the adjustments can be made. Obviously, this is quite complicated because there's a lot of voter initiatives that have adjusted those lists, but nonetheless, I think we can play a role in maybe rethinking that list and those lists, and maybe, try to make them better and try to center what crime victims want as well with some of these offenses. And I also hope we have a pretty big data piece to this to look at, how many convictions are there for each type of offense like this. Because I think a lot of the discussion of these offenses sometimes focuses on ones that are pretty rare, and the ones that are very common, like robbery, it's taken for granted they should be on this list. And anyway, I'm getting too far into the weeds, but anyway, looking generally in big picture and drilling down into the serious and violent lists. Any questions or thoughts on that one? Doesn't look like it. Okay. And number 4 is supervision practices, or, and by that I mean parole, probation, PRCS, mandatory supervision, all the sort of community supervision as it's called. Looking at procedures and practices here, we hopefully want to look at the use of technical violations, which I know is can be very tricky to look at, but to the extent folks are sent to prison or jail for things that are far less than a crime, if that happens, if there are protections that should be put in place. But we're not going to assume that's also a huge widespread problem either. We want to look at the the data and see what's happening to the extent that we can. And I think there are also some other things we've heard from judges and practitioners about parole supervision and some of the rigidity there, and what has to be done if a violation happens. And then number 5 is the Racial Justice Act implementation, sort of following up on what we heard about at the last meeting. And I'm sure we'll discover other issues as well. And of course, we have room to add more or tweak these as we go through. So we can talk about that at the next meeting and subsequently. So that's sort of what we're suggesting as the menu for next year. And we'll move forward with those first 2, start prepping those, and unless we hear otherwise. Professor Remmel.
You're on mute.
Thanks. These are all big topics and important topics to challenge. I just ask that maybe at in the early January meeting, we talk about whether the committee should look at the sentence of life without parole, especially for youth offenders, in light of the California Supreme Court's decision in Hardin. I know the committee's done some important work in the past when I wasn't on the committee, but I wonder, coming out of that decision and then a new recent case about an as-applied challenge, whether it would make sense for us to look at either the list of special circumstances or like Europe has a fundamental right to hope. I think might be some interesting issues we could shed additional light on from what the committee did, the important work the committee did a few years ago.
Great, definitely. We'll add that to the list. There's a lot to do there. Okay, and then just logistics wise, this is basically the same slide we had last year. We're gonna, I would suggest we have 4 to 5 meetings total. 3 to 4 of those will have topics. Then we'll have the final meeting will be this meeting where we sort of have report approval and look at the next year. We'll have the first meeting in February or March. And on that topic, we mentioned about accomplice liability, particularly for extreme sentences with women, And we'll reach out to everyone and set a schedule that works for everyone as much as possible. And we'll start that, in the new year. So that's the logistics front. So that's all I have on topics and schedule. Any other questions or thoughts on that before I turn briefly to crime statistics? Okay, so violent crime. So I give these regular updates on crime statistics. We use two data sources. We use data from the FBI, and then there's a smaller set of cities that report a smaller set of crimes, just violent crimes, the Major Cities Chiefs Association. The FBI data covers more places, more crimes, but it comes out a lot slower. So we don't have any updates from that since I last spoke to the committee last month, but we do have new data from the Major City Chiefs Association. So I want to present that here. This is January through September. This is what these agencies report up to this sort of professional association. It's just violent crime. So that just means homicide, rape, robbery, and aggravated assault. And it has the 8 largest cities in California, including places patrolled by the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department, which is about another 2.5 million people in Los Angeles County. So the bottom line is violent crime in those places has declined by almost 6% compared to the same time in 2023. Big drop in homicide, 13%, big drop in reported rapes, 17%, and smaller drops in robbery and aggravated assault. In the cities that are not in California that also report data, there's a slightly larger drop in violent crime. And, you can see the drops in other categories as well, roughly similar to California. And we also look at the three of the 8 places are just in LA County, and we can see the violent crime statistics there, slightly smaller drop overall, but drops in homicide and rape and aggravated assault, and a 6% increase in robbery. So, this is a good sign that we're sort of going in the right direction. Obviously, this is just a small set of cities. This data could change. We'll have to see what the full year looks like, but this is sort of where we are at the moment. Any questions or thoughts on that?
Tom, can we continue to say that violent crime rates remain near historic lows?
I think so. It's a little bit tricky because we don't quite know what the rate in 2023 was, because there was some data reporting issues with Oakland where they reported like a 200% increase in aggravated assault that they said was wrong, but DOJ hasn't updated with the right number. But anyway, even with that, if you sort of adjust for that, we were about where we were in 2008, and we're a little bit below that. So I think we have had lower violent crime rates in California, but we are pretty low. We're well below the height in the early 90s, for example.
And property crime?
Property crime is, if the trends we saw in the FBI data that went through the middle of the year hold up, property crime will be the lowest it has ever been outside of the pandemic years, where it was, unnaturally low, I would say. Now, within that, certain offenses may be higher, but as a whole, property crime.
I appreciate there's a bunch that there's noise and there's details in year to year, but I'm just saying the overall curves and overall trends, I think in California and actually probably throughout the country, are that we are at or near 30-year lows.
Yes.
All right. I just think that that's helpful for everybody to keep in mind who works in this space.
Absolutely.
Okay. I think we're ready for public comment. Is that right, Tom?
Yeah.
All right. So before we move to formally vote on the draft report, we'll have public comment. To get in line, please select the raise hand function if you're on Zoom. If you're calling in, hit *9. Please note that this hearing is being recorded, and if you make public comment, your name and/or phone number may be displayed as part of the recording. Please hit the raise your hand button now, and we'll take a minute or two to see how many people want to comment, and then based on that, I'll see how much time each person has. Oh, I see you made that note. Thank you. Please note also that we accept public comment in writing, and those comments can be mailed to committee staff whose emails are on the committee webpage. Tom, I can't see who's
We've
involved.
got Crispy has her hands up. That is it. I'll stop the screen share.
All right.
Should I get it
Yeah,
going?
Crispy, let's have 2 minutes. I look forward to hearing from you.
Hi, I'm Crispy, survivor of harm. Thank you, Senator Skinner, for all your work in this committee and in the area of public safety. And thank you, Professor Rummel, for uplifting the need to discuss LWOP next year. This is my last time attending this committee's meetings as well as Senator Skinner. Thank you, committee members, staff, panelists, and public commenters for all your hard work. And I hope you will continue to help end mass incarceration. Please remember to treat people like the human beings they are and to include those with lived experience in the discussions. This is how we achieve lasting public safety. I will be reading comments from incarcerated people. From Dortel Williams, incarcerated at Mule Creek State Prison. As a person inside, I want to thank you all for a very informative and inclusive series of hearings in 2024. I value your expertise, the education your reports provide, and your balanced approach to serve all of Californians with prudence and professionalism. Thank you. And this is from Ronald Montez, Senior Inside Organizer with Initiate Justice, incarcerated at California Men's Colony. I fully support the expansion of post-conviction discovery and having the arresting police agencies pay for prison sentences with the revenue generated from traffic tickets instead of police agency keeping traffic stop dollars in their police accounts. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Crispy. I just want to, because you've been such a long time and loyal follower, I hope that everything is okay with you, and I hope that you are able to join us next year.
Thank you.
right.
There's some bigger fish to fry given our current political situation, so I'm going to focus on that.
All right. I totally appreciate that. Thank you, and please send our regards to the people who've participated through you. You've been an excellent conduit for people inside, and I think we all appreciate it, so thank you. Let the record reflect that Assemblymember Bryan is here. Good to see you.
Been here the whole time, but unfortunately logged in as my under my wife's computer, so I've just been in the audience listening. But looking forward to those topics next year, Tom.
All right.
Now I know if I see that name again, I'll know I'll know what to do. Sorry about that.
And Assemblymember Bryan, I want to make sure that you don't have any comments, or do you have any comments, suggestions, edits to the recommendations for our current report?
No, no comments, recommendations, suggestions. I think we've done, some incredible work, and also very much looking to this conversation next year, the serious and violent conversation in particular, because I think also in that conversation, we should talk about whether those are the appropriate headings in the penal code, period. The way that they get used, narratively without the context that we will likely be discussing.
Somebody who practices under the 3 strikes law, I'm very familiar with the list and its consequences. So I think that I agree, it's of great importance. And Assemblymember Bryan, as our lone conduit now to the legislature directly, I hope that you can help us to the extent appropriate and possible, fill Senator Skinner's unfillable shoes for next year.
That is not possible, but I will do my best.
Exactly. All right. We're now at the final deliberations for our 2024 annual report. I'm not going to rehash each of the 10 recommendations at this time, but instead ask if there are any final additions or modifications from committee members that would like to make to the report. All right. Finally, can I have a motion and second to adopt the draft report, subject to our discussion earlier, including the prerogative that I have as chair to make non-substantive changes, approve design, and execute its publication?
So moved.
I'll second.
All right, because this is our really our most important vote of the year, I just like to hear everybody on the record. Professor Rummel.
In favor.
Great. Judge Espinoza.
Yes.
Assemblymember Bryan.
Aye.
And I also approve with again, my tremendous thanks, especially to staff, to all the people who've appeared before the committee. It's a tremendous amount of work that goes into it, and I look forward to seeing it in final form, which we should get out when, Tom?
Hoping for middle of December, so around December 18th or something like that.
All right. This is, this is the end of our meeting and our year. I want to thank everyone again. I hope that you all have a very happy holiday. I want to express my deepest appreciation to everyone. As I said, especially to Tom, Rick, and Joy, Senator Skinner, we will miss you. We accomplished a lot together, and I look forward to continuing our work in the coming year. Thank you all for your commitment to this committee's work, and we'll see you next year. I'm always available if there's anything that I can do, and I look forward to continuing to work with you. Thank you all.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.